I'm Matt Martelli, and this is a very special edition of the Off-Road Racer / High Octane Hustle Podcast.
Yes.
I'm here with Teresa and Jane. It's Cinco de Mayo. We're going to have some beers and some tequila in celebration of this fake Mexican holiday. It should be awesome.
I mean, you know, this is the third... this is like an annual event for us now, you know, third time in a row that we've had you on, and now we came to your place this time, so this is great. It's time to celebrate.
Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I will tell you though that is the best way to drive in LA traffic is with a nice mezcal buzz.
Which I will not be doing.
Right?
I'm going to stay. Nope, I'm not.
We're all here.
So we're clear on that.
I wasn't. Just to be clear.
Undisclosed locations.
I was not drunk. But I didn't feel any road rage. It was fantastic. I was like, man, who cares? Like, it's going to be 4 hours to get through 2 hours of traffic, but it's cool.
Right?
It was worth it.
The upside.
It was worth it.
It was mostly just because you were around Jane and I, I'm sure. That's what it was.
That's it.
You know.
The calming effect.
It was. That's definitely Jane and I are very calming.
Yes, we are.
It's definitely
We
what
are.
people the term people use when they refer to us.
I don't know about that, Teresa.
I don't think so either.
I don't think so either. But what I think is really fantastic is today's date is actually Cinco de Mayo.
Right.
We've never pulled that off.
Yeah.
I mean, we started on Cinco de Mayo and then wound up. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, you know, eventually we're bound to nail one, right?
Yeah. If not, we keep trying, right?
Right.
And how great to be in your studio. Your studio is amazing, let me just say. Walking in here, I was like, it captures the essence of the mint, of everything that you love doing, all these colors against the wall. Like, I just want to talk about it all.
Yeah, no.
I'm already ready.
I was telling you guys a story before. Like when we started this podcast, we were renting a studio down the street that was very functional, but it was very corporate, and it didn't have the soul of off road. And I know you've been to Horsepower Ranch.
Yeah.
So you know Todd Clement, who started that, like that aesthetic is off road, and so I wanted to bring that to our studio and you know, showcase a lot of the paraphernalia and the old decanters, and I've got some really cool stuff in here. My favorite thing in here though is this helmet. That is KJ Howe's helmet, and he had talked Schlitz Liquor into sponsoring the Mint one year.
That's amazing.
And they gave him that helmet, and he went out and did a bunch of other races in that as well. So
That is so
the
cool.
real stuff, as well as all of some of our vintage decanters and trophies, Baja map, and all the different
so
things
good.
in here.
I know that when we did our first podcast with you for Cinco de Mayo, you did bring a couple of the decanters. So you guys can check out that episode, the early episodes with Matt, and then you can maybe eyeball which ones they were.
Well, it's it's an
trivia.
important part of the history.
I like the trivia
of the Mint, but also like to me it ties in racing and alcohol, and that's two things I love. Number one, but no, it's actually funny. I don't know if I've told this story other than in written form, but we did a wine 2 years ago. Was the first time I think with Dofo Winery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they're good friends, and they have a winery up in Temecula, and they're big motorcycle enthusiasts, right? The grandfather has this beautiful collection of vintage bikes, right? And then Damien, his son, has carried that on. And so I was looking for a way to like tie that thread into racing, and I'm like, all right, how do I do some sort of BS PR spin, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I found the connection between wine specifically and racing, and it was hilarious because it's totally interconnected. Like, so the very first automotive race in the world took place in France. And of course, where did it take place? Out in wine country. And so they gave the winners, wine, right? Well, fast forward 10 years later, and they get the next big race that they're going to do out in, the countryside of France. And it ends up that the first area that they started with wasn't totally bitchin' for car racing.
Yeah.
So they moved it, and they moved it to the Champagne region of France, the winemaking area. So then the winners get champagne, and that becomes the tradition, right?
Yeah.
Shaking.
Right?
Well,
Can we do that now?
No, the shaking.
Yeah, but no,
Yeah.
The
definitely.
shaking comes like 30 years later,
Really?
right? It's 30 years later.
How you know all of this history,
Right.
and you dive into it to really find it out.
Well,
it's great.
I have lots of funny anecdotal stories tied to this, but about 30 years later, we go as Americans to race against Ferrari. Ford does, right? And they have this young racer who was really good, who became very famous, Dan Gurney. And as his way to give the middle finger to the French and the Europeans, they presented him with this beautiful bottle of champagne that you're supposed to keep, by the way, and drink and share with people. And he shakes it up and sprays it on everybody. And it was like his way of telling everybody to fuck off, right? Because they had like basically cheated to make sure that the Americans didn't win, and the Americans still won. That's where the tradition of spraying champagne came from, right?
Well, I like that story.
Yeah. So I was like, cool, man. There it is. It ties into, why we do wine. And now fast forward, like off-roaders drink beer at the end of, a hard off-road race, and it's the best damn beer you've ever had. Right.
Right.
Like,
It gets all the dirt out of your mouth for sure.
There's two things you want. You want a beer and you want some tacos because you're usually starving
That's
too.
it. Yeah, I totally agree. Yes.
But yeah, I found that story in digging for some sort of historical reference for it. I thought that was pretty cool.
I love that.
It's great.
Yeah.
I mean, there's something about alcohol in general. It's a celebration thing. Yeah. It's always about that. I mean, we're here celebrating. Yeah. We're enjoying this. So it looks like in history, that's mostly what it's always been, right?
Yeah. Especially once you get to that finish line.
Yes, for sure.
Now, what do they open up? We did the Mint last year. Teresa was there this year. I didn't make it, but I know you guys miss me.
We did.
But beyond that, though, last year they were doing champagne when they were crossing the finish line up on the platform there at the Mint 400, right?
Yeah, when we took over the Mint, we thought it was very important to bring that tradition back to off-road racing. It had been in and out. Off-road racers had emulated road racers, but it hadn't stayed. And one thing that bothered me about a lot of the off-road races is like, yeah, you're beat up by the time you get done, but like, there's no celebration at the finish line. Yeah. It's like, yay, we won the Ball 1000. And it's like, nothing.
That's it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's
and you're
it.
like,
it is, yeah.
Honestly, the best parties I've had at the end of off-road races have been at Who Songs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like we left the finish line and then started drinking. But I always thought that was weird. I'm like, we got to bring the energy up and celebrate it. So we brought back the champagne sprays, and we think that's an important thing. I mean, all the way down to the kids. We give them some apple cider and they get to spray.
And did that come about because of you kind of diving down that rabbit hole of finding out the other story?
No.
Or did that just
we brought that
evolve?
Back
Just
because we thought it was necessary to to celebrate a victory and a win.
Yeah,
do it in
definitely.
the proper fashion.
Definitely.
But no, I only figured out the connection between the regions of France and wine and automotive culture, auto racing, just a couple years ago. You know. And I was like, aha, now I can, point to it and tell the story of like, and it's logical because if you think about it, even now, like, where are the best roads to ride? They're out near the wineries, out near the country.
They really are. Every time I want to go out, I'm like, okay, in between the mountains, up by the wineries. Yes, the rolling hills, and they're usually the nicest. So yeah, totally agree.
So now everything seems to make sense, right?
It does. Where the origin comes from,
right?
Where it all begins. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and then it was, long tradition with off-road racing of, started with, I think Ducati was always the original beer that would get handed to people at finish lines, and which is made in Ducati just across the border in Baja. So that makes sense. And then later on, some more of the tourist beers, became popular, the Coronas and such. But we got one of the OGs right here, the
yes,
Modelo.
We do. Cheers.
Cheers.
A little advertising placement for them.
Big time.
I know. And so
that tastes good.
It does, huh?
It does. It does. Who doesn't love a nice cold beer?
So there's so much on the wall, so much going on. I mean, you started, sharing about the helmet over here too.
What's that one?
That one's a helmet. Built Well was one of our sponsors.
Okay.
And so they have a great painter that works with them, Hot Dog. And I went over to him and I said, hey, can you guys paint us some vintage helmets as awards, right? And I think we did that the first year we brought the bikes back.
I love that.
And
That's great.
so we handed everybody a vintage style painted helmet, which was really cool.
Love it.
Yeah.
You know, I've been doing Shelby Hall's helmets like that because she wanted in the legacy and memory of her grandfather, Rod Hall. And so we had Rodney Hall on the side of his, you know, very vintage like that. So I've been doing her helmets like that as well. So she just raced Nora.
I know,
Yes.
but I'm thinking that maybe next year he'll have you do the helmets for the Mint 400. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Totally.
All the ideas.
I had a couple sips of beer.
Well-
I'm coming up with great ideas right about now.
Right? We'll
They're all coming
a
around.
new way to enslave Teresa, right?
I love when
saying.
people, hey, you know.
She throws out her calling card there, so I took advantage. And I
was
don't
good.
even race. Not in the dirt.
Well,
I could,
pavement.
I could like say, hey, you want to paint my helmet? Enslave her
It's
that
all
way.
part of it. It's all part
Definitely.
of it.
It's a ruse.
And looking at these decanters, though, I mean, they're so amazing. And I know you've probably shared that part of the history a little bit, but do you know where that part of it kind of started as?
Yeah, I mean, Jim Beam at the time would sponsor not just the Mint, but they sponsored a lot of stuff, and that was kind of their thing. Like golf tournaments and horse racing and stuff. Is they
And
would
this is like 60s or
50s, 60s, into the 70s, and then it went away. And like I was saying earlier, I'm one of those people that like I can't let go of things. And so I actually went to Ohio to what's left of the factory that they used to make the decanters in. And now it's a great company. They make plates and cups and stuff like that, really nice ceramics. But I figured out that the reason that this factory was there is that the clay for all these older decanters came from the Ohio River, from the banks of the Ohio River. It has a special type of clay that's optimum for this, right? And so I asked them, I said, hey, would you, consider making these decanters? And they're like, nope. I was like, why not? And they're like, well, it's
pretty easy.
It's complex, right? Nobody wants them. And I'm like, well, I think we can sell a few. But they didn't have the manufacturing anymore to do it. So they gave me the name of a guy that lived in this little town in Ohio along the Ohio River. And I went to this guy's house, probably scared the crap out of him because he's like, who are you? But I tried to convince him to, make them for us. And he's like, I don't have the equipment. I'm 92 or whatever. He didn't want to do it either. And so then we sourced them in a lot of different places. Currently, they're being made in China, which we're trying to move the manufacturing right now because of lots of different issues. But right now, I have ones from 2 years ago sitting in a sea crate in China in a harbor, right? Like the rest of the world does of everything. But we're gonna keep doing it. I love it. I think it's an important cultural thing.
I was going to say, it's almost like the lost art. I mean, we're looking at the helmet there too, and it's funny because this weekend, pinstriping and stuff like that, a lot of people talk about it, and not everyone does it anymore, and it's hard to find these people that have handcrafted or know how to produce some things like this, and then they just disappear.
Well, I think it's important, in everything you're doing, especially for an event. Our racers, our fans, even our sponsors, they all spend a lot of time and money to come out and participate in this. And that's why we go so far with the trophies and the merchandise and the, everything, the decanters, the finisher medals, et cetera. Man, we could phone it in and make a lot more money, and just not work as hard. But,
you're creating an experience.
Yeah,
though.
it's
It
what
becomes
makes it
experiential.
Yeah, it and it's funny because when you analyze cultures, I always compare them to religion, right? I'm
Ritual.
if you're Catholic, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can consume, right? There's necklaces and rings and all this stuff. They built a culture around a religion, and that's part of the experience. And so there's been bits and pieces of it throughout off-road racing history, but it would fall away. It's like, I remember going to races and like, they didn't even have a shirt.
Yeah.
You couldn't buy a shirt for a Parker or whatever the race was at the time. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have a shirt?
But if it was an Indy race or an F1 race, that there's going to be a shirt, a ring, a coat,
everything.
A helmet.
Yeah.
And so bringing that up another level, I think makes
the
experience better for the person who's viewing. I mean, regardless of whether they buy anything. I mean, it's just great.
And I like, that it means something to people. It's a bookmarker for a memory, right?
Yes.
And so when you go into people's bars or garages or shops, they can tell you about, it was 2023, broke my truck in half, had to walk back. You know what I mean? Whatever the story is, right? And it's tied to that physical thing. So
yeah, no, you feel like Jane just said, like the Mint 400. It's an experience. It's the atmosphere. It's the culture. It's the vibe of it.
The people.
You feel everything. It's
everything.
It's the full experience. Being out in the desert,
the environment,
the smell of it's all of it.
I remember when I was growing up.
And the alcohol.
Yeah.
definitely.
I remember when I was growing
Celebration.
up.
Yeah.
And one of our friends' kids was racing little go-karts, and the smell of the bean oil.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
You have an experience around
It
that.
is.
And the minute you smell that again,
You were like, where is it? Yeah.
Yeah. Where's it at?
Yeah.
Where to race at?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that's definitely, I mean,
It's all part of it.
all those visceral things that you
Yes.
experience, the heat, cool air, the smell of the desert.
The hangover.
Sometimes the hangover. Yeah.
Sometimes.
Why do you think they come up with Burning Man?
yeah.
They're like,
And
we got to have a reason to do this.
Oh yeah, there's all of it. I mean, it's a really cool thing, and especially, I think contextually now, having us all as a world have gone through COVID and had those things taken away from us.
Sure.
Now more than ever, I think people value it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why it's so important for people like us to keep it around and to make it so understood, because like being in this room, we walked in this room and we felt everything about it. You feel, the culture of what it's bringing back, and you want to look at everything and you want to touch everything. We didn't, though, I swear.
No,
Some
that's
of it.
fine.
We're gonna, because alcohol
Like
makes us
little
do
kids.
strange things. We're gonna touch it all.
Right.
I'm gonna put my fingerprints all over it.
But that's what it's about. It's getting back to the experiential part of life, of
Yeah.
living, because that's what it is. It's not,
Well, and I think what really is cool too is that your podcast brings this into people's homes that might not necessarily be in a position where they can venture out to the 400 or any of the other races that you do. And they feel like they're a part of it. And everybody wants to be a part of something. I want to be cool. I want to be the cool kid.
Yes.
I want to hang out with the cool kids.
Yeah, I agree.
And racers are cool.
I think
We agree.
I think that's what's cool about your guys' podcast as well, because you have a much wider breadth than we're very focused on off-road racing, that's just our mission. But, we're all over 20 here, so we grew up on print, right?
Yeah.
And so one thing I realized is there's 30 years of print, magazines that kids now never see.
Yeah.
Right. And what's even more of a crime is that all that content never got digitized, because many of those publishing groups went out of business.
Talking about that.
I got to tell you, Greg, he's sitting off camera here. He's probably going, what is she going to say? He test rode for Honda and Kawasaki, and I can't tell you the stack of magazines that I probably should be giving to Marcel, because we talk about digitizing these things and having an opportunity to see him on the cover of something, flinging a 4-tracks over, hanging on. I mean, we've got some great photos.
But that's precisely
and
why.
Stories,
and that's why this is important. Is it gives a digital record of that era, right? Like, there's so many people that were part of off-road culture that nobody knows, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you go to Google them, there is no web page for them, right?
Yeah.
And then the other part is what I've found is people who are savants are usually very terrible at self-promotion, right? Mm-hmm. So you're like, man, you should have a web page about yourself, and they're like, they don't need it, but not like the old days where a magazine would then champion who they are.
Yeah.
You know, in a large part, like in off-road, like there is very little media, right? So we have to create our own media.
I love it.
Yeah, and I do love that because even I forget to tell the stories, and I know how important they are because then everyone forgets about them. And I'm like, well, no, this happened. And they're like, well, where is that? And I was like, oh, you're right.
Oh my
It wasn't
gosh.
caught in there. And, you know, back in the day, just like you said, like I'm in all these trucking magazines, and that most of it was not, they're just magazines.
Yeah.
They was not redone or, you know, digitized.
Yeah.
So all of that stuff, you know, my dad was like that too. Like, oh, there's all these things. It's like we have to flip through magazines. Then we got water damage on them. Guess what? Those are gone now,
Yeah.
you know? So that history just disappears.
Yeah.
So it's so nice now that we have things like to be able to save them and records of things like that.
Greg sent me a text the other day. I got to tell on him again, too. And he's like, did you see this article? And it happened to be put out by Spectre, and it was right around SEMA. And I'm looking at it, and I look at him, and I'm like, I wrote that. I'm like, when they changed their platform, all of the articles that I had written, close to 100 articles that I had written, gone by the wayside. Yeah. But he found something, and he was looking for something on the picture of his car so it was a SEMA entry. And I'm like, dang, that's cool. I think it's really cool to have that stuff.
It is.
To showcase where we came from.
Or these tangible memories, like what's on the wall here. Because, I mean, museums and things like that, like it is. People need to know about all of this stuff. I mean, or us sharing about it. Like, I love that you start. He's like, it's time.
No, I'm listening. I'm just gonna.
You know,
Can I
just
have
like the
orange with
Off-Road
mine,
Racer
sir?
podcast, you know, and you starting
Thank
to
you.
do that more to share more people's stories. I mean, I know for us, for Jane and I was same thing. We like, how do we share these people's stories of how they're getting into things, you know, and why they got excited about off-roading or
Ultimately, it started
building.
with that question I asked you. How'd you get to be such a badass? Really?
Yep.
That's all it boils down to.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's because I hung around badass people.
Yeah.
Like it's that simple, right? Because like you don't.
Me too.
You read about stuff, and that's definitely a big influence. But when you're around people that are doing stuff that's remarkable, you're like, oh yeah, you know, like a couple weeks ago we had the Brenthal brothers in here, and
Right, I saw
and
that one.
I was very curious. I'm like, at what point did you think you could build a trophy truck?
Yeah.
Like, because if you think about it, it's a pretty crazy thing. It's like, you know, engine, transmission, like it's the whole thing. You know, it's not like you could be like, oh, you know, I'll go buy a built vehicle, stick a label on it, change some wheels, and you're good to go.
Thank you.
It's a lot more complicated. Like you're building a car, a race car.
I've kind of jumped into that one now. I totally agree with you. And I'm kind of like, what the fuck am I doing? But I have to do it.
Sure.
I feel like you just get to that point where you're like, when do you start? You just have to.
I think that's really important that you touched on that, because if not now, when? Right?
It is.
And it really
Totally.
kind of boils down to our period of time on this earth is finite. So you better freaking live it up, man.
So like for
Go for your
Brenthal, like
dreams.
what was that for them then?
It was progressive, right?
Yeah.
But you know, it's funny because like I think a lot of times you're so focused on doing it that you don't take a step back and go, you know, we built 10 trucks. Does anybody else doing that? Like, wait, we just blinked our eye and we were these shit kids from Huntington.
And they said they weren't even into like off-roading
No.
and stuff when they started it.
No, so it's just a good story of like, you know, really finding your limits, right?
Sure.
You do something and then you're like, all right,
Or pushing your limits, right?
maybe we could build the whole car, right? Or maybe we could, you know what I mean?
What's next?
Yeah.
What's next?
So it's really cool. But no, it's cool. I've been watching, obviously on social, what you and Jason have been doing, and I also
you.
look at it and I'm like, man, she's crazy. You know,
I am.
like
I feel like that too.
because I know how much work it is, right?
It is.
You know, and but it's cool. And I think too, the other big thing that I like seeing, one of the outcomes of social media is there's a lot of women who have got into physical builds in automotive, and other women are seeing it and they're like, hey, you don't have to have muscles coming out of your neck to do this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
and for me, for Jason and I both doing this build like this and showing it the whole way through, like we've never done that before. It's always been like, oh, you build something for SEMA, you sign an NDA, you can't show anything until it shows up at the SEMA show, and that's it. And then we forget to post about the rest of the build, like the long nights, the stupid crazy stuff. Like you're just so worried about everything else that that's what you're focused on, and then the final outcome that you forget about the rest of it. There's just so much content I've never posted about that I'm like, it's so important, like you said, to put this out in front of someone else to say anyone can do this.
Yeah,
it's not, we're literally using everything. We're using forklifts and whatever to make things like this happen. Like, don't put limits on yourself. Don't say like, well, I can't do it because of this. Like, figure out a way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, about SEMA builds in particular, and how you want to hold everything back and then unveil it, right? That's been the model. But it's almost like they should be doing the opposite of that now, right? I understand, like, you kill the aha moment by sharing all that info, but there's also this build up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just how social media works, is like, the old days of like, going to the Detroit Auto Show and you have no idea what Ford's bringing and no idea what this company's bringing. I mean, first off, it's really difficult to keep things secret. But secondly, from a build perspective, it's, showing this entire process. And I think that's one of the interesting things about where we're at in the automotive world, is how important and powerful the aftermarket is, right? So like when you look at what is really popular right now, it's off-road, right? And it's because people have been adding wheels and they've been adding tires and lifts and suspension and bumpers and doing all these things that, feed into consumers wanting to modify their vehicle. And it's almost like the OEMs have been fighting that a little bit in the past. And now they're like, oh, okay, let's just give them what they want. If they want a $100,000 truck,
and they do want that,
let's give it to them, right? And so now you see this evolution happening where there's a little bit more embracement of it. But I think that it's a very important thing for everybody to understand, is that we are individuals, and we're always going to want some sort of modification. And to not play to that, I think, is a huge mistake. I think when you look at the amount of kids right now who don't really care about driving or automotive, I think that's part of why they don't understand that, the vehicle gives them freedom. It gives them individuality. It gives them all these things. Right. Yeah. And, it's one of those,
Sorry, no, I want to add it to that. It's when you're done.
One of those things,
Yeah.
So
they're comfortable with their devices in their hand.
I know.
So they're getting different types of dopamine hits and all of that.
Yep. It very much is. And I think that's why it's so important for us to do the things we do, to go out there and to make sure it's on social media, it's on YouTube. If we're not putting enough of it in front of them, then how do they even know about it?
Right.
Yeah.
And so
exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, no, but it's true. And it's like, I went up to the Portland, the One Motorcycle Show this weekend, and we're doing real deal workshops up there. And same thing, just if people are excited about something, they'll try it, but you have to put it in front of them. You have to give them opportunities to even know about it. So I think, especially what you're doing with the Mint 400 and like making sure it's publicized more, and we just have to feed it to the world.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that definitely. Motorcycle show, was there something that you saw that was like something new kind of emerging, or a trend like leaning more towards a different style of bikes or builds? Or
what I love about the show in general is it has everything. It has all different types. So you'll have, you have European bikes, you have Asian built bikes, you have Harleys, domestic bikes and stuff like that. Triumph. They're all over the spectrum, and the way they customize them are also different. But that's what's so cool, is like to be at a show where it's more eclectic and it brings all the cultures together kind of, as opposed to just like, oh, this is only one. So there was tons of like families there, more individual people I saw that wanted to just like soak it all up. Like, what's going on here? You know, tons of people from Canada. It was insane the amount. We're close to the border up there in Portland, and I forget how close that is, but so many people coming down like that. But it was more of the eclecticness, I think, of it that brought so many people in.
Yeah.
So no real emerging trend, just looking at it as generally across the board customization regardless of where the...
Almost like, yeah.
Yeah.
Almost like money didn't matter, too.
Oh, okay.
Like the amount that you spent on a bike, there could be something that you could tell someone spent godly amounts of money on next to it. And then next to it was like someone just customized this in their garage, but it looked cool. But you could tell they did that also. And so they were personalized in a different way. So it didn't take a lot of money to do that.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe that was the trend, I guess. Maybe that.
The one thing that I've seen that is really fascinating to me as a subculture of motorcycles is a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but some people are starting to hand forge parts, right? And
I've seen that.
They're doing ornamental stuff and they're doing, also regular parts. And they're like, hey, it used to look like this in 1940s. Let's make it look like that.
Yeah.
But it's
But make it more functional.
And it might be on a modern, a more modern engine package or what have you, or
the
frames.
vintage,
Yeah. And
piece.
like that, I think that's the cool thing is like, once you start, like a bike or a motorcycle or a car, it's a puzzle, right? It's got all these pieces put together. And it was designed specifically for a purpose, right? But there's like in the 2000s, we started getting greedy and making cars really shitty, right? You know what I mean?
Are we talking about the plastic parts that break off?
Style. No, just style everything.
That too?
It's like I look, I have a really nice truck outside, F-350 Ford. It's completely computer driven. Like I tried to do anything with it, and they're like, you can't. Like you're not even supposed to change the oil. There's like special gaskets and stuff that are like, don't do that. And I'm like, it's an oil plug. Like it's not rocket science, guys.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's gonna void the warranty or whatever. So I think there's a lot of people that, they want to tinker with their vehicles and they want to modify them and even beyond what's offered out there, right? And I love that, when people take it into their own hands, they're like, I'm going to forge this piece in my garage and, melt it down out of whatever material and, hand forge or hand, design it, make molds out of whatever wax, whatever they're doing. Yeah. So I've seen a little bit of that. And I was just wondering if more and more people are like, hey, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I know it's a lot of increases the work quite a bit.
Well, definitely. And I know what you're talking about. And yes, I guess in my world, in the motorcycle world, I definitely see that in a lot of forging. And we've had parts done from other people. But I think kind of like what you're getting at is like people are doing this stuff themselves. It's kind of like Brenthal too. Like a lot of people, we all start from like, we don't have enough money to do this, but we're going to figure it out and do it ourselves anyway. So I feel like that's the emerging trend again of like before where it used to just be you had to put money into something for it to be cool at a show, where now people are building things themselves again. And then that's what's going to the show. So
I think the other thing that you can see is on social media, people kind of taking memes of built not bought and explaining what does it mean between built and bought and how that effectively looks. So I think that you're going to see a lot, I believe, just maybe out of peer pressure, you're going to see a lot more people thinking that, I think I want to build that. I mean, that's what our company has been about for, since 1987. So, I mean, after building, I can't take too much credit for it because I only work on my own car, but after having built, I don't know how many Corvettes, Greg used foam and hand-shaped all of the fenders until he found a fiberglass guy to make, he made his mold. So I think that people are going to see, it's not just emerging that we're changing the wheels. It's not one thing. It's looking at all things from, like you said, the older car, 40 years old, and just seeing, and I hope it happens. I hope it happens a little bit more quickly.
And there's things
Personally.
like YouTube University, it's literally us showing like our build, like what we're doing and showing people that they are capable of doing these things too. So it's encouraging people that, yes, go out there and
That's
try this
how I learned to work on my car.
for
Two
sure.
people, YouTube and Greg.
Really, right? Yeah.
For real.
Nice.
Yeah. It's a lot of it.
Yeah, it's funny because like I'm good friends with builder Robbie Woods, and him and I always have these design discussions where I'll look at a truck or I'll look at a vehicle and I'm like, oh, I hate this about it. I hate the lines here. Like, look at what they did here. And that's purely from a, design aesthetic, right? And
Because that's where it all started for you, right?
Yeah. But it's funny because, it's form over function, and then that reverses as well, right? And when you're mass producing vehicles, you have a lot of compromise. Whereas when you're making 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of the same thing, you can make a wing this big and you're like, fuck it. It costs 20 grand for this wing. It is what it is. If you don't like it, go buy a, whatever,
Some off Amazon.
yeah, just go buy
Amazon
something
wine.
mass produced. And that's honestly what I love about this merging between, it's hot rod culture, but it's hot rod culture.
agree.
It crosses over into bikes, it crosses over into off road, but it's the same idea of like looking at something and knowing that aesthetically you can make it better, mechanically you can make it better, and that's the
100%.
one thing that really blows my mind is, when we have this evolution happening right in front of us in off road racing, right? And these are not guys who went to college and studied, engineering or whatever it is. These are guys who in the beginning were drawing it, guys like Nye Frank and, some of the older builders who really started this whole thing, and they figured out a lot of stuff, right? And then they would go, break it or race it, and it
trial
would
and error.
do something. Why is it kicking? We got to widen the wheelbase or whatever it was, right? And same thing with hot rodding, with drag racing, all the racing that you guys do, on pavement. You're like, well, why is this car losing control here? Well, it needs a wider stance, or it needs better suspension, or transmission, or whatever it is. It's a puzzle, right?
Yep.
But it's one of the things I really love about even to this day is these just people figuring it out.
Yeah.
So
and hopefully that's what we're helping people do, is getting back to that, because it's kind of like what you were saying is like they're on their phones, they're on their devices. And so what can we do to help them get excited about working on something, their bike that's in the garage, or whatever that is, as long as it can be that one little thing and they start tinkering on it, that's the start, that's the beginning, and the evolution of, we all know it snowballs from there.
yeah, no, absolutely.
I think, too, if we could find some young people, especially on the West Coast, to be representatives or ambassadors. I mean, it's great that we're these old school people, but really to reach those younger kids that think this could be a possibility, and even inviting their parents in to see what this world is like and how, it's going to save the world.
Right. Well, I see it happening like in certain like little pieces. Like we have the Fab School, and every time I go up there or see what they're posting on social media, it's a lot of young people learning how to fabricate.
Yeah.
And which is really cool, because I think it's a very powerful thing. Like when you concept something in your mind and then you make it with your hands, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's a little bit of a God complex, right? You're like, man, I could
look at what I can
create. Do some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly what real deal, like what we're trying to do with that, is that someone comes up and, they've never welded or pinstriped or, metal shaped or silversmith, done any of these things. And they come up and we're like, it's not about us making it for them. They built this. They did this themselves. And when they realize that there's something that clicks in their head of like, well, what else can I do now?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's...
But how do we go a little bit further, and how do we keep that fire lit? How can Real Deal kind of continue to feed that, or how can Mad Media or whatever we're doing, GTS Customs, how can we continue to stoke that fire as soon as they leave the seminar or as soon as they leave the race? Because it's all really great when we're there and we're super hyped and we're super excited and now what do we do?
Yeah, and we're always looking, like, so we go to Portland, for instance. So we're looking for other people in that area to help feed them into that. Like, where can I continue something like this? Sure.
Yeah.
Where is there a local workshop or a community center, and where can I learn how to weld and build? So, so that's what our goal with Real Deal is, like, go. Right now it's all over the country. It'll be all over the world, but all over the country to kind of have these little pockets like that and just keep going and filling them up and finding places like Fab School, UTI, all these other like here. There's other there's community workshops that they can do. So lots of stuff like that.
Yeah, but keeping them interested in the can do, definitely following that.
Yeah.
I mean, in off road, we have a saying, but it's also like more of a mantra.
Okay.
It's like sweep the floor, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So like you talk to a lot of the people who are prolific in our sport and culture now, and it's like, hey, how'd you get into this? I swept the floor at so and so shop, right?
And I've done that.
It's true. It's true of hot rod culture. It's true of bike culture, so on and so forth. It's like, don't be afraid to do that, especially when you're young. You got time, but you got to make the effort, and go for it. So,
well, we need allies from parents. The parents have to be the allies. They can't say, "Oh, go, sit down and watch some television," or otherwise get involved.
Absolutely. I was gonna say it's almost like it's also the ego and the humbleness that comes along with that. Like, why do I want to sweep someone's floor? Because that's what you get now, and it's like I think kind of what Jane's alluding to, like. We all grew up in the culture where we had to do things like, we just automatically did that kind of
pick
stuff.
Weeds.
Yeah, exactly.
Before I got to sweep the garage out for my dad.
Totally. So we were all doing those types of things. So yes, us encouraging the next generation.
So we got to attack the parents.
Yes.
No, it's part of it. I mean,
absolutely.
I feel like I was extremely lucky that I, at 14 years old, walked into an ROP graphic design program, and I was like blown away, and good teachers and great opportunities. And, I think about that now, like, how do we create that for the future? Not just for us, but for, the next generation of kids, right? Like, we're at an interesting inflection point in this country where, we have a president who wants to bring back manufacturing and wants to breathe more value into middle class and blue collar work, physical work, right? And it is something we should be doing. We should never let go of those things, especially from let's just throw out the mass manufacturing money part of it, but from an understanding of like knowing how to forge and make things by hand. Like there should be like a National Archive Association that they're like, yep, we're going to build so many off-road builders, so many hot rod builders, and so many motorcycle builders a year. And there's a quota, house
Sounds
builders.
like we're starting that.
Yeah. Woodworking, same thing. It's,
all of the,
it's
totally.
like you see stuff and you're like, man, that's really remarkable. And you're like, man, well, 30 years ago, there used to be a lot of those guys, or gals.
And it started in junior high school.
Yeah.
I call it junior high school. I didn't go to middle school. So
Yeah. No, it really did. And when we're going out and teaching, we taught workshops at the Mint 400 too.
Yeah, which is really cool.
We're teaching 6-year-olds how to weld. And, so people will come up and be like, well, yeah, but I think they're too young. And it's like, you have to, they want to learn, but they have to respect the tools.
Sure.
You have to teach them. That's up to us to teach them how to respect the tool, how to respect the trade, and how we come in and showcase that is really important, Yeah. So it's all about how, them 6-year-olds to 60-year-old, whoever it is, and all in between of how do we get them excited about doing things.
Yeah, they're never too young to be able to pick up a tool or make
really
their
aren't.
bed or put their own
Definitely. Well,
garbage in the trash.
Let's slide in.
Slide in. I like
Let's
that.
slide in.
Ending
Our first
conversation.
tequila.
Oh, what's in here?
Those are our
My
chapelinas. Yep.
Yeah, your friend.
So
Can't open that.
there you go.
Okay.
I like that you say my friends.
This is old school, tried and true.
Yep. I like
Blanco Tequila Cazadores, right? It's like when you go to somebody who's usually Hispanic, this is what they're drinking, right? And this is a Blanco. This is the base. This is, a basic tequila. It's a good one. It's a little hot, so there's a little lime to chase it if you need to. But cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cinco de Mayo.
Woo.
Oops. I could have missed this microphone thing.
Nice and peppery, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. Growing up here in San Diego and
That's good.
spending a lot of time crossing the border, drinking tequila. I like
And
them
you
all.
said you were growing up in this area.
Well, you start.
Yeah, how old were you when you were doing that? That's why you
definitely-
crossed the border.
We're not recommending the children do that. We want them to do
I was
work.
definitely underage, and so that it was.
It's okay.
It was what you did in that era.
Yeah.
It's like 80s.
Yes.
So ditch school, go to Tijuana.
Here's
I went
the
to the
stories.
beach, too.
Here's the stories.
People were like, I remember coming home like trying to hide out from my parents because we're drunk. Just don't
Wait,
interfere. Don't
I don't
interfere.
know if I'm ready to
16
talk
years
about any of
old.
those stories
Because
yet.
there's no way. Let me tell you, my dad. There was no way I was. If I had one sip of a beer, he'd be like, "Let me see your eyes."
He knew.
Oh yeah, he knew. So, but you start off with the horrible tequila and the bad experiences and all that stuff, and fortunately, I eventually got to the better stuff, right? But it didn't start off well. it was definitely a crash course.
It's all a learning curve. I mean, just like anything, right?
Yeah, but this is the Blanco
that's a
is
good one.
It's
It's
like kind of the most common one,
yeah.
right?
I think we have a bottle of that in our
Yeah.
liquor cabinet.
Yeah, and we're gonna move up to a reposado, which is rested in a oak barrel for a month, and so it smooths it out, much smoother taste, right? And then we're gonna skip añejos and go right to extra añejos, and
Jane's
that's
One of my
favorite.
friends.
I thought we were doing these wild. Don't we need to? I guess I have a beer.
yeah.
Oh, you're such
I was like, don't I need a
second.
chaser? I'm a little
no,
what?
we've had
What'd you
these
say?
before.
I know, but
We've
still,
eaten these before.
they're kind of dry. That's all I meant.
They're a little dry.
Yeah.
But they're seasoned really well.
It was funny. I just
They're
was
nice.
at my
I just
friend's
meant I
house,
needed a beer to follow it.
and he had the
Candy
chapelinas,
ass.
but they're huge, and I'm like, I don't. Like now I can see
Mostly
more
'cause
of
it's
what
dry.
it is.
It's like-
I don't want
Yeah, I
to
don't
look
need.
at.
They just look like kind of dried
Yeah,
cranberries.
it could
Yeah,
be.
no, and they don't taste any different. It's just like they've like fall apart in your mouth, kind of.
Yeah.
It's like little flakes.
Definitely, I recommend them.
The things.
What are we gonna do with you? Would you like another cricket?
So we'll pour the repo
like-
I
next.
mean, yeah,
You're gonna need
it's
it with
not-
your-
Yeah.
Tiny.
Tiny.
That's what they call me. Sorry. On High Octane Hustle.
Yep. Okay. All of a sudden, everybody freezes.
And that's a yep.
Yep.
What he said.
Oh God. Sorry.
That one. Okay.
Should we all turn and look at that one?
Yeah. Like
I'm
raccoons
just
in a
gonna hold
trash
this
can.
right here.
Do it.
Raccoons. I already did.
Oh, good. Don't cut
Technically.
that.
Right?
Technically.
All
right.
I already did it.
We won't give you the eyeball.
Okay. I'm focused now. Ready?
No, you're not.
Totally.
Sorry. Okay.
All right. All right. We're going to cut the podcast right there and put the second part of this episode on the hike.
I told you you weren't ready. Remember, this is our Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
Here, did you want to hold this up?
I was trying to say High Octane Hustle, and it turned out to Huck.
You really like our episode, our podcast, huh?
All right.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, it's enunciation, right?
Should have done that at the beginning of 2 hours ago.
So we're going to take...
Let's do this with a straight face.
So this is a 5-minute long outro. And he takes more to drink.
That is really good.
I know.
Some more.
That
I'm
is
not going to
really-
lie.
Is
This
this
is
from your
way
yard?
better with that.
That is really fucking good. All right, ready? All right, we're doing it. We're going to cut the podcast right here. And the second part of this podcast will be on the high... Why can't I say that? High Octane Hustle. High Octane Hustle with Teresa.
I'm not Teresa.
I know you're not Teresa. I was saying in general, Teresa.
Okay.
We're going to cut this podcast right here and do the second part of this podcast. Second part. High. Why is that so good?
I believe in you.
Ready? All right. We're going to cut this podcast right here and do the second part on High Octane Hustle.
Woo! We did